You did what with the money? Mom's voice cracked like glass. Dad dropped his fork. Angela went pale, then furious. And me? I just kept chewing. If you've ever been called selfish for choosing yourself, you'll want to hear the rest. She had cooked that stupid roast again. Garlic too strong, thyme like dust. The kind of dinner that only gets made when someone wants something. I knew it the moment I smelled it, even before I opened the door. And yet I came. Like a good daughter. Like the version of me they could still summon with 3 words. Family dinner tonight. The table was already set when I arrived. Polished silver, folded napkins, wine breathing in a crystal decanter like it was some kind of ceremony. Dad was scrolling on his phone. Angela had a glass of Chardonnay already half drained, her nails tapping lightly on the stem. And Mom? She smiled like I was a guest she barely tolerated. Not a child. Not a member of this house. Just a seat to be filled. We made it through the salad in silence. A few comments about the weather, about Angela's newest cleanse. I nodded. I sipped. I waited. And then it came. Angela leaned forward, hands clasped like a victim at confession. So, the place in Sedona confirmed the retreat, she said, eyes wide with faux innocence. It's a total reset. No phones, all healing. I just need to cover the deposit by Monday. I sipped my water. That's great. Silence. Angela blinked. Mom glanced at Dad. He stayed silent. It was Mom who broke first. She always did. Claire, she began, too softly, too rehearsed. Your sister's really been through a lot this year. That awful breakup, her therapist ghosting her. We thought maybe, just maybe, you could help with the deposit. Like you helped with her last course. You're doing well. You live alone. You're comfortable. I set my glass down. I already used my savings. Angela stiffened. For what? I didn't rush. I wanted to see them lean forward. I wanted to feel the tension rise like steam under the lid. I bought a house, I said calmly, out past Holloway Ridge, off 17th. They blinked, a beat, 2. Then, you did what with the money? That glass-sharp voice, that crack in Mom's composure. Dad dropped his fork. Angela went pale, then furious. You're joking, she hissed. That place is a dump. You used your money for that? I shrugged. It's mine. I wanted something that was mine. Mom's tone turned icy. We're not angry, just disappointed. We thought we'd raised you better than this. Better than what? I asked. Than making my own decisions? She looked at Dad for backup, but he kept his gaze fixed on his plate. Typical. Let the women sort it out. Angela stood. You could have helped me reset my life. I needed this. You chose some trash shack over me. I smiled then. Not because I was amused, because it was familiar. The script, the guilt, the assumption that I existed to buffer Angela from her consequences. I chose myself, I said. The room froze. I thought maybe they'd argue, plead, even shout. But instead, Mom's voice went quiet in that dangerous, clipped way. If you can't support this family, Claire, maybe you shouldn't be living under its roof. I didn't flinch. I wasn't planning to. Angela scoffed. You're bluffing. I stood up, took my coat, and slung my bag over one shoulder. Check the guest room. It's already empty. Their eyes widened. I didn't wait for their next lines. I knew them too well. The script had played out the same since I was 17. Dad finally spoke. Quiet but bitter. Don't come back until you remember what family means. I opened the door. Cool air hit my face like relief. I just did. Then I left. No goodbyes, no second glance. Just the sound of my boots on the pavement, steady and certain for the first time in years. The floor creaked like it had been holding its breath. The hinges screamed. Something scuttled across the ceiling before going still. I stepped inside anyway. Light barely reached past the doorway. The windows were clouded with grime, dust clinging like regret. I pulled my sleeve over my hand and wiped a small circle. The outside world was still there. Gray, cold, watching. The air was thick. I didn't gag, but it was close. I stood in the center of the living room, or what used to be one. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. The floorboards shifted beneath me, uneven and unpredictable. In the corner, a pile of something once domestic, broken fan blades, a chair leg, the bent spine of a photo frame. I set my bag down and exhaled. Nobody knew I'd bought this place. Not even the realtor asked why someone like me, employed, single, credit solid, wanted a condemned house with no heating, cracked pipes, and half a roof. I didn't explain, because it wasn't about the house. Not really. It was about space, about owning a silence no one else could fill with expectations. I moved methodically. Window, lock, water line, electrical. The basics. I didn't expect anything to work. I just needed to understand what I was fighting with. By sunset, I'd cleared a walking path from the kitchen to the back door. I used gloves and a mask, tossing out bags of crumbling paper, moldy boxes, something that might have once been a blender. I didn't let myself stop. There was a moment as the sun dipped behind the tree line where I stood in the kitchen and let my body settle. Sweat down my neck, gloves sticking to my palms and in my chest. Not despair. Not even fear. Just a strange, unfamiliar stillness. I had traded comfort for control. That night, I curled up in the corner of what might become a bedroom. No sheets, no heat. Just my coat and a flashlight. The floor was hard, but it didn't matter. I'd slept on softer things and woken up more exhausted. The next morning, I was already sweeping when I noticed the cabinet. It was tucked behind a pile of splintered chairs, its doors swollen shut. Something about the way it tilted. Not forced, but hidden. Like it had waited to be seen. It took effort to clear the path. I tugged the doors open with a crowbar. Inside were books, ledgers, envelopes dated 20 years back, and beneath them, a folder. Stamped in blue ink, Holloway, South Estate, partial transfer documents. I froze. Holloway. The name ticked something loose in my memory. An old man, a rumor, land disputes, tax liens. I pulled the folder out carefully. It was damp around the edges, but mostly intact. Inside, a map sketched on yellowing blueprint paper. A signature I didn't recognize, but next to it, a seal. County approved. Pre-cleared for parcel reassignment. This house didn't just sit here. It had a story. I stood up slowly, the folder in hand, my pulse quiet but fast. A creak. Not from the floor. From outside. I walked to the back door and looked through the glass. A man stood at the edge of the property, arms folded, staring dead at the house. At me. I opened the door a crack. He didn't move. I stepped out. "Can I help you?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice like gravel being turned over, he said, "Where did you get that file?" I looked down. The folder was still in my hand. I tucked it behind my leg. "Inside," I said simply. "In a cabinet." He nodded once. Slow. "I'm Dean Holloway," he said. "That cabinet belonged to my father." I blinked. And then he added without changing his tone, "You bought more than a house, girl. You stepped into a legacy war." Dean didn't wait for me to respond. He simply turned and walked back toward the tree line behind the property, disappearing into the woods like he hadn't just dropped a grenade into my chest. I stood there for a while, the file still warm in my hands, the map trembling slightly in the light breeze. 60 days. I didn't know what that meant. Not fully. But I knew enough to understand it wasn't just a timeline. It was a challenge. Back inside, I cleared the kitchen table, or what passed for one. I laid the documents out, smoothing them flat, anchoring the corners with a hammer and a can of paint. My eyes scanned the boundaries drawn in ink, The Holloway South lot, the surveyor's initials, the pre-approval mark for reassignment, a section that extended beyond the house, right up to the future expansion zone the town had posted about in its quarterly newsletter. If the reassignment was still viable, that land could be worth thousands, maybe more. And I, by accident or fate, now owned the only house sitting directly on top of it. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't clean. I just sat there, studying the pages like they might catch fire or vanish if I blinked too long. My phone stayed off. No one was calling anyway. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patrice. Local. Sharp voice, sharper questions. She agreed to meet me that afternoon, and I brought everything in a shopping bag because I didn't own a briefcase. We sat in her office, surrounded by tax books and framed diplomas. She flipped through the papers slowly. Then again. Then a third time. "You're telling me," she finally said, "you bought a condemned house with a hidden file cabinet that may or may not prove partial ownership of land the town is about to buy back for redevelopment?" I nodded. "And no one knew this file existed?" I shook my head. Patrice leaned back, tapped a pen against her lip. "If this transfer was ever formally initiated but never contested, and the estate fell into tax default, it's possible. Possible. You've stumbled into a dormant claim that was never closed. Which means legally we might be able to assert it's yours by proxy." "Might?" I asked. She gave me a look. "You're living on a technicality, Claire. And technicalities can be defended. But first you have to hold it." "Hold it?" She folded her hands. "Occupy the home. Maintain it. Repair it to minimum safety code. File a quiet title action. You have 60 days before the county finalizes the next sale round. If we can establish you as the rightful resident with a valid claim by then, this house and everything under it is yours." I left her office with a new folder and a deadline. When I got back to the house, I found a note tucked into the front door. "Check your inbox. Thought you'd want to see this before it's too late." I didn't have to guess who A was. I unlocked the door, stepped over a stack of wood I'd left half cut, and went straight to my laptop. The email had no subject line, but the attachment was a scanned copy of a temporary occupancy form, pre-signed by my mother. Angela had filed it that morning. She was trying to claim residency. I sat back in the chair, pulse rising. It was fast. Too fast. Someone had told her. Someone had tipped her off about the value of this house. The form wouldn't hold legally, not unless I accepted her presence. But she didn't need the law on her side yet. She just needed access. I looked up slowly. Through the cracked blinds, I could see a car parked across the street. Not moving. Lights off. She was already here. I checked the door again. Locked. I walked room to room. No signs of entry, but my bag had been moved. The kitchen window was cracked. I hadn't noticed it before. I picked up my phone, hesitated. Then I messaged Dean. "She's trying to claim the house." "You said 60 days. Is it still mine if someone else steps in?" The reply came faster than expected. "Not if they settle first. You have to be the one standing when the dust clears." I walked to the basement, pulled the rope lamp, and opened the rusted latch I'd forced 2 days earlier. The safe was still there, untouched. But I'd brought tools this time. With every twist of the wrench, my arms burned. I didn't know what I expected inside. Old cash, maybe. A deed. Or nothing. Just rust and disappointment. But when the door finally creaked open, the air that escaped wasn't stale. It was cold. Inside were 3 folders, thick, labeled, bound. Property development records. Holloway South Lot tax suspension letters, 2002 to 2008 final parcel agreement. Unfiled. I lifted them one by one. They were real. Official. Untouched. My fingers trembled. The last one had a note clipped on top, written in neat block letters. "Do not file until dispute resolved." I sat on the floor, folders spread around me. Above, a floorboard creaked. Then a shadow passed across the narrow basement window. I didn't move. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. And I knew for the first time this wasn't just a house anymore. It was a battlefield. The knock came just after noon. 3 deliberate raps. No hurry, no hesitation. I was sanding the window frames in the front room and nearly missed it over the rasp of wood. When I opened the door, Angela stood on the porch with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a clipboard in her hand. She didn't say hello. "You have mail," she said, thrusting the clipboard toward me. I didn't take it. "What are you doing here?" Angela gave a theatrical sigh. "You really want to do this on the porch? Fine. This," she waved the clipboard, "is a copy of the temporary occupancy agreement Mom signed. Filed it this morning. I'm moving in." I blinked. "No." She smirked. "You don't get to say no. Not when it's family property. Not when Mom already agreed." "This isn't family property," I said. "It's mine. I bought it. I live here, you don't." Angela stepped forward, toe just over the threshold. "Claire, come on. You're living in filth. You don't even have heat. Let's be real. You can't fix this place alone. But we could. Together." I let out a short laugh. Since when have we ever done anything together that didn't end with me paying for it? The wind picked up. Her hair fluttered around her shoulders, still styled like she had somewhere better to be. "You're making this harder than it has to be," she said. "I'm not here to fight. You're holding paperwork and a bag, which means I came prepared," she shot back. "Because I knew you'd be like this. You always make things dramatic." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me so she couldn't push past me. "This house is legally mine. The paperwork is clear. And even if you did try to muscle your way in, the county would throw your claim out the moment they saw how long it sat abandoned." Angela's smile faltered for the first time. "You think that means anything? Mom's already been talking to people. She knows people on the board. If I show I'm living here, if I just appear stable, they'll lean in my favor." "You'd lie about residency?" She shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time." I stared at her hard. "You packed your life into that duffel?" Angela looked down at the bag. "Numbered just my intentions." I stepped down off the porch. "Well, take them somewhere else." "You're not the only Whitmore entitled to land," she snapped. "You're right," I said, stepping closer. "But I'm the only one who signed a deed." The screen door behind me opened with a creak. Dean stepped out, hands in his coat pockets. Angela turned. Her face shifted, recognition flickering into something like wariness. "This is private," she said quickly. Dean nodded. "So is trespassing." Angela looked at him, at me, then back again. She adjusted the strap on her bag. "I'll be back, with someone who can read signatures better than you two." She left without another word. When she turned the corner at the end of the street, I let out the breath I didn't know I was holding. Dean stepped off the porch and walked beside me to the curb. "She's not going to give up," I said. "Nope," he replied. "She's going to try to find a way in." "She already has," he said, then handed me his phone. On the screen was a photo of Angela, taken that morning, talking to someone outside the county records office. "Town clerk," Dean said, "her cousin on Mom's side." "Of course." "I thought she didn't do mornings," I muttered. Dean chuckled once. "She does for land." Inside the house, I opened the manila folder Patrice had prepared. In it, copies of the survey map, timelines of Claire's repairs, and the new photos we'd taken for the occupancy affidavit. I'd nearly finished prepping everything to file the quiet title. But now it wouldn't be a silent process. Angela would drag it into court, make it ugly, question everything. I poured coffee with shaking hands. Dean sat at the kitchen table, eyes scanning the map like he was committing it to memory. "Why does she want it?" I asked. "She never wanted anything that required upkeep." "She doesn't want the house," he said. She wants what it connects to. The land. The payout, he corrected. She thinks if the county buys this lot, she'll be standing here with a claim in hand. But she won't, I said. Dean looked at me carefully. Not unless you let her stay long enough to make it look like she belongs here. The next morning, I found the front gate open. The porch light had been unscrewed, and on the front step was a box of wellness pamphlets. Angela's old brand logo stamped across the top. It was a warning shot. I carried the box inside, flipped it over, and found a sticky note taped to the bottom. You don't get to erase me just because you moved in first. They didn't call ahead, didn't text. They just showed up. Angela, in a pressed blazer that didn't fit quite right, holding a manila folder like it was a trophy. My mother, silent and composed, her lipstick too bright for a small-town morning. And my father, Thomas Whitmore, his posture saying he didn't want to be there, but his presence proving otherwise. I didn't open the door immediately. I watched them from the window as they stood in formation on my porch. Not knocking, not moving. Just waiting for me to answer like I always did. But I wasn't the same girl who used to say yes before anyone finished asking. I opened the door without a smile. We're here to talk, Mom said. About? The house, Angela chimed in, and the misunderstanding. I raised a brow. Which part? The part where you tried to file an occupancy form behind my back? Or the part where you left threats in my mailbox? Angela smiled tight. Let's not make this more hostile than it has to be. We brought our counsel. She gestured to a man in a suit standing just off the steps, face unreadable, briefcase in hand. And I brought mine, I said. Patrice stepped into view from the hallway, her heels tapping lightly on the old floorboards. For a moment, no one spoke. We'd like to resolve this privately, my mother offered, already stepping into the living room like it was still hers. You gave up that right when you sided with Angela's fraud. Patrice cut in, crisp and clear. But Claire's open to hearing your offer. That's all this is. A conversation. Angela sat on the edge of the couch, folder opened. We're proposing joint ownership of the property and any attached claims. In exchange, I'll withdraw my occupancy request and agree not to file for adverse possession. Joint ownership? I repeated. Of a house I bought, renovated, and legally reside in? Dad cleared his throat. You're making this more dramatic than necessary. No, I said, voice steady. I'm making it accurate. Patrice slid a file across the coffee table. Claire has documentation of every payment made toward the purchase, supply receipts, utility activation logs, and photographic proof of ongoing repair. She also has the original deed, tax records, and land surveys cross-verified by a neutral third party. Angela's face tightened. And, Patrice added, we have a signed affidavit from Mr. Dean Holloway confirming historical family disputes over this land and his knowledge that no other Whitmore has lived here or contributed financially or physically to its upkeep. You're calling in him? Mom snapped. That man was practically exiled from the neighborhood. Which means he owes no loyalty to any of you? I said. Just the truth. Angela tried again. We're offering you peace. You're offering me a buyout on something I already own. Silence fell again. Then Mom looked at me. Really looked. Her tone dropped to something softer. You used to be kind, Claire. I used to be afraid, I replied. Now I'm not. The man in the suit leaned in to whisper something to Angela. She stiffened, closed her folder, stood. This isn't over, she said. It is here, I said. They left without another word. I watched from the window as the car pulled away, Mom staring straight ahead. Patrice stayed a while. She reviewed the file one last time, highlighted key dates, added 2 more witness affidavits. The quiet title would be filed Monday. That evening, as I was sweeping the front porch, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Your mother is devastated. Angela's sleeping in her car. Is that what you wanted? I didn't reply. I didn't have to. I went back to sweeping, letting the dust scatter into the wind. The house smelled different now. Not like rot or mildew or panic, but like paint, lemon oil, fresh-baked bread cooling on a chipped ceramic tray by the window. The kind of smell that says someone lives here. Someone stays. It had taken 2 months, 3 floor repairs, a ceiling patch, and hours of YouTube tutorials on plumbing. But it was mine. Fully, quietly, and legally mine. The title arrived in a thick envelope. Official, heavy paper with my name embossed in small serif font. Claire Whitmore. No cosigner. No family trustee. Just me. I held it like it might disintegrate in my hands. Dean came by that afternoon with 2 mismatched mugs and a thermos of bitter black coffee. He didn't ask to come in. He never did. But he looked at the porch, freshly stained and free of Angela's pamphlet boxes, and nodded once in approval. "You stayed standing," he said. "Barely," I replied. "But you did." We drank in silence for a while, watching a squirrel run along the power lines. I told him about Patrice filing the last of the court papers, about the clerk confirming Angela's occupancy claim was void. He didn't say much. He never did. Before he left, he handed me a flyer, neatly folded. "Rebuild Life, a workshop for starting over." Hosted by the local community center. He'd scrawled, "Come speak." They need someone real at the bottom. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. That night, I received a letter in the mailbox. Handwritten. Pale blue paper, floral edge. My mother's handwriting. I opened it on the porch steps under the porch light. I'd rewired myself. "Claire, we raised you to be strong. Maybe too strong. I hope someday you'll forgive us." Mom, I read it twice. Then tucked it inside the front cover of the Holloway estate file, where all other unfinished stories lived. Angela hadn't contacted me since the day she stormed out of Patrice's office. The silence was suspiciously peaceful. I didn't trust it to last, but I also didn't fear it anymore. That weekend, I rearranged the living room, moved the couch to face the window, bought a new lamp, rehung the old family photo. Not in the center, but off to the side, half-shadowed. A reminder, not a shrine. When Monday came, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt done. I made tea. Chamomile. Not for sleep, just for ritual. Later that evening, I stepped out onto the porch. The sky was low and quiet. Below, kids rode bikes in lazy loops along the cul-de-sac. A woman walked her dog in a puffy coat far too warm for spring. One of the neighbors, 2 houses down, waved when she saw me. I waved back. It was simple. That wave. That moment. But it was more real than any apology I'd ever begged for. Inside, my phone buzzed once. An email. From a small magazine that covered local human interest stories. Subject: "We'd love to feature your story. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, then turned off the phone and set it face down. I didn't need an audience. I needed peace. I closed the door. The click of the latch was quiet, but final. She didn't shout. She didn't break anything, but she stood her ground. And that silence was louder than any scream. The people who once saw her as expendable were forced to watch her claim what was rightfully hers, not with vengeance, but with proof. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but when it does, it resonates through every wall they tried to bury her behind. Because sometimes, choosing not to be used is the most powerful form of rebellion. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps me keep creating more justice-fueled stories like this one.